Half-Life Cares. It was released during a time in which it was perfectly acceptable to leave a player to their devices, to drop the player in with some demons and a gun and say, have fun. These early shooters like Doom, Wolfenstein, and Quake can be incredibly fun and innovative in their own right, but it's no stretch to say that immersion and subtle storytelling was not a priority during development. In 1998, Half-Life changed everything. It's been said 100 times, but the impact this game had simply cannot be understated. Unlike its contemporaries, Half-Life was a bit more preoccupied with being an experience rather than a time sink. This was the game that introduced the staples of Valve's single-player game design. Scripted segments instead of cutscenes, control rarely taken away from the playable character, and a mute protagonist serving as a mirror to the person playing are all fundamentals of Valve's games since. Which is why it's so shocking just how right they got it almost 25 years ago. The success story of Valve is beyond the scope of this video, but the success of Steam, the fantastic games to come later, and Valve's status as leaders in the fields of virtual reality and portable computing would have never happened without Half-Life. Immediately when starting a new game, it's clear that this is going to be a very different game than anything that came before it. Valve's disposition to provide the player with a palpable atmosphere is instantly highlighted in the beginning of their first game. You play as Gordon Freeman, a theoretical physicist working at Black Mesa research facility. You're running late for work, and the game starts with you riding a tram through the facility, getting acquainted with the type of place that you're inevitably going to have to navigate through and survive in. When you get off the tram, you get a chance to walk around the facility and talk to other people.
My God, what are you doing?
I really enjoy this part of the game, and it further suits Half-Life's MO. Make you care at least slightly about the place you're in, so it gives you something to lose when it inevitably all goes to hell. I have heard criticisms of the game's opening before, and it is a bit tedious on repeat playthroughs, but it's integral to the core of the game. Also, it's just short enough. It does what it sets out to do without getting in the way. This is also the section where you get the HEV suit. I love this suit of armor for both its look and design, but also for its thematic relevance. It doesn't totally suspend the disbelief of a single scientist taking out hundreds of aliens by himself, but it certainly helps. Once you have the hazard suit on, you go into a room with a huge machine called an anti-mass spectrometer. You push in an alien crystal and cause what's called a resonance cascade, causing portals to open from the border world Zen. The first Half-Life is great because it hides beneath the veneer of a standard sci-fi, aliens are taking over plot, but actually deals with a lot of subtle storytelling tricks to make the relatively simple plot feel so much more complex and engaging. I've always appreciated how you have to be the one to push the crystal in. It makes the player almost complicit in the disaster and resulting apocalypse. From here on out, your only goal is to survive. Your way in is blocked, and you must venture deeper into the facility while fighting off the now iconic enemies of the series. You have zombies, head crabs, hound eyes, bull squids, and many more different alien types to fight in the halls of Black Mesa. One that stands out is unsurprisingly the Vortigaunt, also referred to as the alien slave in the game's files. Of course, in Half-Life 2, the Vortigaunts are hyper-intelligent and become allies to humans. After a while of only fighting aliens, you hear whispers that the military is coming to save you. Unfortunately, when you finally come into contact with military personnel, they're hostile and you must shoot back to survive. It turns out the government sent the military to cover up the entire incident, and that includes killing any Black Mesa personnel left alive. The military are really fun to fight in this game thanks to the fantastic AI they have, especially in a game this old. They plan ambushes, they throw grenades and duck for cover. They're really well implemented and fun to fight. Eventually, you come across a gigantic tentacle monster that's blind and can only attack you by hearing you. The sequence to start off the chapter is fantastic. It does a great job at conveying the power of the monster, and it lets the player know that you're probably not going to be able to just shoot the thing until it's dead. Instead, the chapter and boss fight must be completed by turning on the oxygen power and fuel, causing the beast to explode at the press of a button. It's a really satisfying conclusion to the boss fight because it's put you through hell to get there, and it feels earned. Instantly, you're thrown into another boss encounter that's similar in design, and that you can't just shoot the thing to kill it. I always liked the design of the Gargantua. It's one of the many creatures in the first game that was cut from the second game, when they sort of switched up enemy designs. So once again, this boss is more focused on the exploration of the level and using your environment to your advantage. The next chapter of the game is perhaps the most infamous one, or maybe second most infamous. I'll be honest here, I'm an on-a-rail defender. Not only do I not think it's bad, I actually like it. I understand many players' frustrations, though. This chapter can be a bit archaic in terms of Valve's usually seamless sense of progression. Though it's been a long time, I remember first playing this chapter and getting really confused. I've also heard the argument that it's tedious, but I don't personally agree with that statement. I enjoy riding the cart and stopping to clear out enemies and search for health and ammo. After that chapter, you make it back to the surface and meet these two gentlemen right here. I've always thought it was pretty interesting how this guy says that the science team has been tracking my progress. Well, if that was true, I don't think he'd be too happy with what he was seeing.
I got one. Spoke from the Challenger deep, but I'm positive that beast never.
Eventually, you start getting attacked by these really agile assassins that can be pretty hard to take down. I really like these characters, and it makes me wish that we got to fight the Combine assassins that were planned for Half-Life 2. Gordon is ultimately captured and thrown into a trash compactor, but it's no sweat escaping from it. Speeding things up here, there's residue processing, which is one of the weaker chapters in my opinion. It's really short, so it's no big deal, but it's not the most fun riding these conveyor belts and waiting. I really enjoy the next chapter, Questionable Ethics, from a story standpoint. You get to walk through this lab where it's revealed that the scientists of Black Mesa were aware of Zen and had already made contact with it, as many of its creatures are found here, either behind glass or being zapped in this contraption. It's nice to have a bit of gray area morality here. After all, you pushed in the crystal yourself. Maybe the alien creatures aren't inherently hostile. And even if they are, they're likely as afraid as you are. This chapter also has one of the funniest parts of the game in it, and something I didn't notice until this playthrough. So I'm just walking around, and I come across a door that needs scanner access. So I've got to backtrack and find a scientist to open it. I walk back and get some scientists, and on my second time through the hallway, only whenever I bring them with me, this happens. A bit later, we get one of the most iconic moments of the game. Yes, the skybox looks pretty laughable by today's standards, but this is such a cool moment. The Valve theme, originally composed just for this game, begins to kick in and you get sucked in by the atmosphere. Quick side note here. The RPG in this game is really cool. Really like how it gives you the option of being laser guided as well as just shooting straight, and I'm baffled that Half-Life 2 omits this feature. There's a part near this section of the game where you end up in this room, and I just couldn't help but laugh. Valve really loved putting you in these explosive insta-death rooms. Eventually you make it to the Lambda complex where survey teams have been sent to Zen even before the incident. You have to fight off some alien controllers in a pretty fun fight, and then Zen. People don't like Zen. For what it's worth, something about the 90s PC game, sci-fi style of it works for me. I like the design of Zen, and when I was a kid it worked in providing a sense of wonder. Unfortunately, what Zen doesn't have is scale or interesting gameplay. The long jumps are kind of fun to pull off, but that's basically all you do here. It's in Zen where you fight the Gonarch. I actually do really like this boss. It's the first one in the game that's focused solely on the action of the fight instead of trying to outthink it. It certainly has an interesting design, and just so you know, it was 100% intentional. The next and second to last chapter, Interloper, is a bit better than the rest of Zen. It works as the last fight with the aliens before you destroy their leader, the Nihilanth. One detail I've always loved is how, when you're making your way up to Nihilanth's lair, you see Vortigaunts just working, and they don't attack you immediately. This kind of shows how they're not all just aggressive, murderous creatures. The Vorts specifically have been enslaved by the Nihilanth, and of course, as mentioned before, would join the side of the human resistance in the second game. It's this moral gray area stuff and attention to detail I love in Half-Life 1. You can't help but feel guilty for how many you've mercilessly slaughtered up to this point in the game. Before you go into the final boss, there's this really cool looking part where you just hop around these platforms. Not even sure why I'm bringing this up, I just think it looks cool. Nihilanth's design is pretty awesome. I know it's just a big alien baby, but I think it's interesting. I love the third arm growing out of its chest. It's similar to the Vortigaunts, as is their ability to communicate telepathically. The lines Nihilanth gives here are bone-chilling and really scared me as a kid. There's some pretty obvious references to G-Man here, which is one of the only times you ever hear another character reference him in this series.
Deceive you will deceive you. Done, what have you done? You hairy man. He's not man.
Speaking of G-Man, once the Nihilith is defeated, that's exactly who you see. I don't know how you could watch this video without knowing who G-Man is, but in case you somehow don't, G-Man is the ultimate mystery of Half-Life. You can catch glimpses of him watching you throughout the events of the game, though he's nowhere to be found if you manage to catch up with him. He's certainly not human, but that's about all we know about him. His allegiances, thoughts, and morals are a mystery, making him all the more frightening. He's also the one who provided the Zen Crystal to Black Mesa that ended up causing the Resonance Cascade to begin with. So at the end of Half-Life, he congratulates you on your efforts and offers you either a job or death. There's a cut line here that I wish was in the final game so bad.
But there are a few survivors of your personal Holocaust who would like the chance to meet the man responsible for the total annihilation of their race.
You go in this portal and that's Half-Life. It's always a great experience playing this game again. It strikes such a great balance between still feeling fresh and well-designed and also keeping that super fun old-school shooter style. The gameplay of Half-Life 1 is fantastic. There's no sprinting, but your base movement speed is very, very fast. This adds a sense of adrenaline to the game that the later Half-Life entries don't totally have, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, I love Half-Life 2 more, probably, but there's something about the combination of Half-Life 1's more classic, quick and dirty approach to FPS game design, with its signature Valve immersion and story techniques, that really works for me. Another part of that classic game design that works for me is that massive arsenal at your disposal in this game. This is something I miss dearly about modern FPS games. It's so fun to carry like 20 weapons all at once, especially when they're as well fleshed out as the weapons in Half-Life. Each weapon has a specific use and timing that makes it fun to use. You have your standard pistol, submachine gun, and shotgun type weapons here, but there's also unique energy weapons like the Tau Cannon and the Gluon gun, as well as more situational weapons like the Hive Hand and the Snarks. You may have noticed that I'm using the HD pack for this video. This is another point of contention among fans of this game. Many claim that the HD pack is incredibly ugly and not worth having on, but honestly, I like it. I prefer having an M4 to an MP5 feel-wise too, even if they are the same weapon gameplay-wise. The graphics, of course, are the easiest thing to notice as having aged in Half-Life. Personally, they don't really bother me. I think Half-Life does enough cool things with art direction and lighting to still look pretty solid for its time. Given that the rest of the game still feels timeless, I'd urge you to look past the graphics if it's stopping you at all from enjoying this masterpiece. If it bothers you enough though, I can easily recommend Black Mesa on Steam, a full remake of Half-Life on the Source engine. Black Mesa is just a bit too different from the original game to replace it, in my personal opinion. But I can definitely concede that it's an incredible fan game that certainly deserves your money, and even that's putting it lightly. It's certainly a better usage of your time and money than Valve's own Half-Life Source, released in 2004. Updates to the Source engine have ruined this port of Half-Life, which was pretty bare bones to begin with. Yes, Half-Life 1 with Ragdoll is amazing on paper, but do yourself a favor and avoid the bugs and issues. And for the record, as fantastic as Black Mesa really is, I highly recommend that you just play the original first. It's held up shockingly well. 25 years later, and I can safely say that Half-Life 1 is still a masterpiece. It's no secret that it's one of the most influential shooters of all time. Half-Life's core design has managed to stay consistent with Valve's other titles, as well as inspiring countless other games and leaving its mark on gaming history. Not only was it ahead of its time, but it's timeless, and will always be one of my favorites to boot back up again. Thanks for watching this video. Thinking about tackling Opposing Force and Blue Shift next, if that's something you guys might be interested in watching. I plan on making videos on all the Half-Life titles and potentially looking into some mods as well. So if you have any recommendations, let me know in the comments.